Syria remains a nation caught in a devastating cycle of conflict and instability. Years of war have fractured the country, leaving a landscape scarred by violence and division. The central authority has weakened considerably, particularly since the dramatic political shifts of late 2024. This protracted turmoil has created deep societal wounds. It has also fostered an environment where extremist ideologies can fester and grow. The very fabric of Syrian society has been stretched to its breaking point. Millions have been displaced, and basic infrastructure has crumbled, leaving many vulnerable and desperate, a situation ripe for exploitation by those offering false promises of order or salvation through violence. This persistent chaos is not merely a localized tragedy, it serves as a fertile breeding ground for extremist groups. Organizations like the Islamic State thrive in such power vacuums. They exploit the grievances of marginalized populations and capitalize on the breakdown of law and order. When governance fails and security is absent, these groups step in. They offer a semblance of structure, however brutal, and an identity, however warped. The instability provides them with ungoverned spaces to recruit, train, and plan operations. This makes Syria a critical concern for regional and international security, as the tendrils of extremism grown in its soil can reach far beyond its borders. The Islamic State, though territorially defeated in its initial caliphate ambitions years ago, has demonstrated a chilling resilience. Reports from early 2025 indicate a worrying resurgence. The group is reportedly gaining strength, attracting new fighters and escalating its attacks. This is occurring within a Syria still attempting to navigate the complex aftermath of President Bashar al-Assad's fall. The conditions that allowed ISIS to rise to prominence in 2014, sectarian tensions, weak governance, and widespread disillusionment, have not been fully resolved. In some areas, these conditions may even be worsening, providing a fresh opportunity for the group to reassert its destructive influence. This essay will delve into the multifaceted crisis gripping Syria. It will explore how the nation's instability directly benefits extremist organizations with a particular focus on the recent resurgence of ISIS. We will examine why peaceful coexistence is an impossibility when faced with the absolute ideologies of terrorist groups. Furthermore, the essay will analyze the implications of recent political changes, the role of external powers, and the potential consequences of a United States withdrawal. Understanding these interconnected dynamics is crucial to grasping the severity of the threat and the challenges that lie ahead for Syria and the world, as today, May 28, 2025, the situation remains critically volatile. Terrorism at its core is anathema to peaceful coexistence. Its fundamental aim is to sow fear, create chaos, and violently impose an ideology, often through the indiscriminate targeting of civilians. Groups like ISIS do not seek negotiation or compromise in the traditional sense. Their worldview is typically absolutist, dividing the world into believers and infidels, us versus them, with no middle ground permissible. This leaves little to no room for the dialogue and mutual respect that are the bedrocks of any peaceful society. The very tactics employed by terrorists, bombings, beheadings, mass shootings, are designed to shatter social cohesion and make reconciliation appear impossible. The ideologies espoused by extremist terrorist organizations actively reject the principles of pluralism and democratic governance. They often seek to establish states or systems based on rigid, intolerant interpretations of religious or political doctrines. For ISIS, this meant the brutal imposition of its version of Islamic law in the territories it once controlled, a reign characterized by public executions, enslavement, and the systematic destruction of cultural heritage. Such groups view any form of peaceful coexistence with those who do not subscribe to their worldview as a betrayal of their cause. Their commitment is to total victory, not shared existence, making them fundamentally incompatible with efforts to build lasting peace through inclusive processes. The pervasive violence and sheer brutality of terrorist acts erode trust at every level of society. They create deep-seated trauma and fuel cycles of revenge and recrimination. How can communities that have suffered immense losses at the hands of terrorists be expected to readily embrace peace initiatives that might involve perpetrators or their sympathizers without comprehensive justice and accountability? Terrorism deliberately targets the social fabric, aiming to break the bonds between different groups and turn neighbor against neighbor. This makes the task of rebuilding shattered communities and fostering genuine reconciliation an incredibly arduous, almost insurmountable challenge for any post-conflict society. Therefore, the idea of achieving a stable and peaceful Syria, while groups like ISIS maintain a significant operational capacity, is a dangerous illusion. Their continued presence, even if weakened, acts as a constant spoiler, ready to exploit any fragility or division to reignite conflict. Peaceful coexistence requires a baseline of security, mutual respect, and a shared commitment to non-violent conflict resolution. Terrorist organizations, by their very definition and actions, negate all of these prerequisites. Addressing the root causes of instability is vital, but so too is neutralizing the immediate threat posed by groups who are ideologically committed to perpetual war and the rejection of peace. The Syrian political landscape underwent a seismic shift in December 2024, with the fall of President Bashar al-Assad's decades-long rule. This event, while hoped for by many who opposed his regime, did not immediately usher in an era of stability. Instead, it plunged the nation into a new phase of profound uncertainty. The collapse of the established order, however oppressive, created a power vacuum that various factions, both domestic and international, scrambled to fill. The transition period has been marked by a fragile interim government attempting to assert control amidst a deeply fragmented and war-weary populace, a task of monumental proportions. The new leadership that emerged has Islamist roots, a factor that has drawn considerable international attention and a degree of caution. For instance, Syria's interim president, Ahmed al-Sharaa, is notably on a United Nations terrorism sanctions list due to his previous leadership role within Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, an armed group formerly affiliated with al-Qaeda. While some European officials have expressed cautious optimism about engaging with the new authorities, significant concerns remain. The ideological background of key figures in the new administration raises questions about the future direction of the country, particularly regarding civil liberties, minority rights, and relations with the West. The immediate aftermath of Assad's overthrow saw a complex mix of reactions. There was an initial wave of hope among segments of the population for a more inclusive and representative government. However, this was quickly tempered by the daunting challenges of national reconciliation, rebuilding a shattered infrastructure and, crucially, ensuring security across the nation. According to a Reuters report from May 2025, the European Union is particularly worried that the ongoing instability, especially in northeast Syria, could lead to the formation of new terror groups or even the release of prisoners involved in past extremist activities, further complicating an already dire situation. This political metamorphosis, while potentially opening doors for long-term positive change, has in the short term created fresh vulnerabilities. The focus of the nascent government on consolidating power and navigating internal political rivalries can inadvertently divert resources and attention from combating resurgent extremist threats. The very newness of the governing structures means they may lack the established security apparatus and intelligence networks of the previous regime, at least initially. This period of transition, as history has often shown, is a dangerous time, offering a window of opportunity for groups like ISIS to exploit the prevailing disarray and attempt to re-establish their foothold. The specter of ISIS, once thought to be largely contained, is looming large over Syria again in 2025. Chilling reports from as recently as April indicate that the Islamic State has been methodically regaining strength. The group is not only attracting new recruits to its banner but has also been responsible for an escalation in attacks within Syrian territory. This resurgence is particularly alarming as it unfolds against the backdrop of a nation still reeling from the dramatic ousting of President Bashar al-Assad and struggling to find its footing under a new, transitional leadership. The New York Times highlighted this disturbing trend, underscoring the persistent threat ISIS poses to Syria's fragile attempt at stabilization. A critical element fueling fears of a full-blown ISIS comeback is the precarious situation surrounding the detention of thousands of its members. Experts have issued stark warnings regarding the potential for mass prison breaks. Estimates suggest that between 9,000 and 10,000 ISIS fighters, along with approximately 40,000 of their family members, are currently held in various detention facilities, primarily in northeastern Syria. These prisons are largely managed by US-backed Syrian Kurdish forces, who themselves face immense pressure and resource constraints. A successful large-scale prison break would not only drastically increase ISIS's manpower overnight, but also serve as an enormous propaganda victory, galvanizing supporters and boosting recruitment efforts globally. the political upheaval following Assad's fall has inadvertently exacerbated the risk associated with these detention centers. In January 2025, Reuters reported that Kurdish-led authorities in northeast Syria began organizing large-scale returns of some prisoners linked to IS. This was largely attributed to the change in the central government in Damascus and the uncertainties it brought regarding the long-term viability and support for these detention operations. While intended to manage a difficult situation, any movement or perceived weakening of control over these volatile populations could be exploited by ISIS operatives seeking to liberate their comrades and swell their ranks for renewed conflict. The propaganda implications of such events cannot be overstated. ISIS has historically proven adept at using perceived victories such as prison breaks to project an image of strength and divine favor, thereby attracting disillusioned individuals to its cause. The release of seasoned fighters would inject experienced leadership and combatants back into its operational structures. This would significantly enhance its capacity to conduct more sophisticated and widespread attacks, not only within Syria, but potentially beyond its borders. The combination of a recovering operational capability and the opportunity presented by ongoing political instability creates a perfect storm for ISIS to once again become a dominant and terrifying force in the region. Section 5. The American Presence, a fragile dam against the extremist flood. The United States maintains a significant, albeit relatively small, military footprint in Syria, a presence that has become increasingly critical in the face of resurgent extremist threats. As of April 2025, reports indicated an increased U.S. military deployment aimed specifically at addressing the immediate danger posed by the Islamic State. American forces operate primarily from military outposts strategically located along Syria's northeastern and eastern borders. Their mission is multifaceted, collaborating closely with the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF, to combat ISIS remnants, prevent the group's resurgence, and also to monitor and counter the activities of Iranian-backed militias in the region, according to analysis from the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. This American military presence, though limited, provides crucial support to local partners like the SDF. This support extends beyond direct combat assistance to include intelligence sharing, logistical aid and air power, which have been instrumental in degrading ISIS capabilities over the years. The SDF has borne the brunt of the ground fighting against ISIS, and continues to manage the volatile detention camps holding thousands of fighters. The U.S. partnership is a vital lifeline for these forces, enabling them to maintain pressure on extremist networks and secure vast territories liberated from ISIS control. Without this American backing, the capacity of local forces to withstand a resurgent ISIS would be severely diminished. Consequently, the prospect of a United States withdrawal from Syria carries profound and deeply concerning implications. Such a move would inevitably create a significant power vacuum, one that extremist groups like ISIS are poised to exploit rapidly. The SDF, deprived of critical American support, would find it exceedingly difficult to sustain its counter-terrorism operations and maintain control over the detention facilities. This could lead to a swift deterioration of the security situation, potentially allowing ISIS to reclaim territory, free its detained fighters, and re-establish safe havens from which to plan and launch attacks, both regionally and internationally. A U.S. withdrawal would not only embolden ISIS but could also trigger a wider destabilization across northeastern Syria. Other regional powers with competing interests such as Turkey and Iran might escalate their interventions to secure their own objectives, potentially leading to new conflicts and further fragmentation of the country. This chaotic scenario would undoubtedly accelerate ISIS's resurgence, turning back the clock on years of hard-fought gains against the terrorist organization. The fragile stability that currently exists in areas secured by the SDF, largely underwritten by the U.S. presence, would likely crumble, unleashing a new wave of violence and displacement with devastating humanitarian consequences. Section 6. A tapestry of intervention external powers in the Syrian maze. Syria has long been an arena for complex proxy conflicts, and the loss of robust central authority has only intensified this dynamic. The country's border regions in particular have transformed into zones of influence controlled by a variety of local, regional, and international actors. According to a September 2024 report from the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, these areas have effectively become autonomous zones, each with its own distinct economy, security apparatus and ideological leanings, forming de facto cantons that operate largely independently of Damascus. This fragmentation underscores the profound erosion of Syrian sovereignty and the deep entanglement of external powers in its internal affairs. Turkey, for instance, wields considerable influence across much of Syria's northern border. Ankara has launched multiple military interventions into Syrian territory, primarily driven by its objective to prevent Kurdish dominance along its frontier and to counter groups it deems terrorist organizations, such as the YPG, which forms the backbone of the US-backed SDF. Turkey has established zones of control, often administered by allied Syrian factions, effectively carving out a sphere of influence that serves its national security interests. This intervention, while aimed at specific threats from Turkey's perspective, adds another layer of complexity to the Syrian geopolitical landscape and impacts the broader fight against other extremist elements. Iran, another significant regional player, has also deeply embedded its influence within Syria, particularly along the eastern border with Iraq, and indirectly via its ally Hezbollah along the western border with Lebanon. Tehran has consistently supported pro-Iran militias, providing them with funding, training and weaponry to bolster its allies and project its power across the Levant. These militias play a crucial role in securing Iranian interests and supply lines within Syria. The United States, conversely, maintains its military outposts in the northeast and east, partly to counter this Iranian expansionism, while also focusing on the anti-ISIS mission in collaboration with the SDF. The competing agendas of these external powers create a tangled web of alliances and rivalries that often complicates efforts to achieve a unified and stable Syria. While some interventions are aimed at combating specific extremist groups, the broader geopolitical competition can inadvertently create openings for others to exploit. The division of the country into spheres of influence makes coordinated action against a resurgent ISIS more challenging. Each power prioritizes its own strategic goals, sometimes at the expense of a cohesive approach to Syria's overarching instability. This fractured landscape, characterized by multiple stakeholders with often conflicting aims, makes a comprehensive resolution to the Syrian crisis exceptionally difficult to achieve. Section 7. The human scars: displacement, division, and a lost generation. The Syrian conflict has inflicted an almost unimaginable human toll, with displacement being one of its most devastating and enduring consequences. An estimated 14 million people have been forced from their homes, a staggering figure that represents more than half of the country's pre-war population. This includes millions who have sought refuge in neighboring countries and beyond, as well as a vast number of internally displaced persons, or IDPs, living in precarious conditions within Syria itself. This mass displacement, as noted by the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace in September 2024, has not only created a humanitarian crisis of immense proportions, but has also been utilized as a tool of conflict management, deliberately altering the demographic makeup of entire regions. This forced movement has profoundly reshaped Syria's social and demographic landscape. Entire communities have been uprooted, and a new generation of Syrians is growing up knowing only conflict, displacement, and division. Many children have been born in refugee camps or in areas outside of their ancestral homes, creating a profound sense of dislocation and uncertainty about their future. The bonds of community and shared identity have been severely strained, replaced by experiences of loss, trauma, and the daily struggle for survival. Rebuilding these fractured societal connections will be a monumental task, requiring decades of dedicated effort, even if peace were to prevail tomorrow. The conditions within many displacement camps are dire, often characterized by overcrowding, inadequate sanitation, limited access to food, water, healthcare, and education. Such environments of prolonged deprivation and hopelessness can, tragically, become breeding grounds for desperation and, in some cases, radicalization. Extremist groups are adept at exploiting the grievances and vulnerabilities of displaced populations, offering a distorted sense of purpose, belonging, or material support to those who have lost everything. The lack of opportunity and the constant exposure to hardship can make young people particularly susceptible to extremist narratives that promise empowerment or revenge. The long-term societal impact of this widespread trauma and deep-seated division cannot be overstated. The psychological scars of war and displacement will linger for generations, affecting social cohesion, economic development, and political stability. For Syria to have any hope of a peaceful and prosperous future, addressing the needs of its displaced populations and fostering reconciliation among its divided communities must be a central priority. However, the sheer scale of the challenge, compounded by ongoing instability and the presence of extremist ideologies, makes the path to recovery incredibly fraught and uncertain, as the nation continues to grapple with these profound human costs on May 28, 2025. Section 8, Prisons in Peril, the imminent threat of escapes and new extremist fronts. The sheer number of detained Islamic State fighters and their affiliates represents an acute and ongoing security crisis within Syria. As previously mentioned, the New York Times reported that between 9,000 and 10,000 IS combatants are held in prisons primarily in northeastern Syria, a volatile population that poses an ever-present threat. These are hardened ideologues and experienced militants, many of whom remain committed to ISIS's brutal cause. The potential for them to break free and rejoin the ranks of active extremist cells is a nightmare scenario for regional and international security agencies. Their escape would not just be a numerical boost to ISIS, but a significant symbolic victory. The detention facilities themselves are often overcrowded, under-resourced, and situated in a region still grappling with instability and the aftermath of recent political shifts. The Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, who bear the primary responsibility for guarding these prisons, face immense logistical challenges and security vulnerabilities. The change in government in Damascus in December 2024 has added another layer of uncertainty regarding long-term support and strategy for managing these facilities. Any perceived weakness or distraction among the detaining forces could be seen as an opportunity by ISIS to orchestrate sophisticated attacks aimed at liberating their imprisoned comrades, an endeavor they have successfully undertaken in the past in both Syria and Iraq. Beyond the resurgence of established groups like ISIS, there is a significant concern, highlighted by European Union officials in a May 2025 Reuters report, that the current political instability in Syria could lead to the formation of entirely new terror groups. The chaotic environment, coupled with the availability of weapons and disaffected individuals, provides fertile ground for extremist entrepreneurs to forge new alliances and launch new violent campaigns. The ideological landscape of violent extremism is dynamic, and new factions can emerge, perhaps learning from the perceived mistakes of their predecessors, or adopting new, even more dangerous tactics to achieve their aims. Furthermore, the transition period and the potential for amnesties or breakdowns in judicial processes could lead to the release of individuals previously involved in extremist activities. While some releases might be part of reconciliation efforts or due to a lack of evidence for continued detention, the risk remains that individuals who still harbor extremist sympathies could be freed. These individuals, once back in society or in ungoverned spaces, could act as recruiters, facilitators, or operational leaders for both existing and nascent terrorist organizations. This multifaceted threat from both detained populations and the potential for new extremist formations underscores the complexity of securing Syria. Section 9. Conclusion: Syria's precarious path and the global shadow of terror. As of May 28, 2025, Syria stands at a dangerous crossroads, its future shrouded in uncertainty. The fall of the Assad regime has not brought peace but rather a new chapter of instability. The nation remains fragmented, with central authorities struggling to assert control and external powers vying for influence. The Carnegie Endowment for International Peace suggested in late 2024 that the most likely path forward was a persistence of this fractured status quo, a scenario ripe for relentless escalation in violence if no comprehensive settlement is found. This enduring chaos creates a vacuum that extremist groups are all too willing and able to fill, posing a severe threat to the Syrian people. The resurgence of ISIS, as detailed in recent reports, presents a direct and immediate danger not only to Syria but to the wider Middle East. Historically, ISIS has used Syrian territory as a base to plan and execute devastating attacks on neighboring countries, and even further afield. A revitalized ISIS, potentially bolstered by prison breaks and exploiting the current political flux, could once again seek to establish a physical caliphate or, at the very least, a significant operational safe haven. This would undoubtedly lead to increased violence, further displacement, and could undermine any fragile progress towards stability in both Syria and Iraq, with repercussions felt across the entire region. The implications extend far beyond the Middle East. The European Union has expressed grave concerns, with internal documents highlighting that the overall terror threat level remains high. As stated in a May 2025 EU counter-terrorism document reported by Reuters, Islamist jihadist terrorism is identified as the most prominent threat to the bloc. The potential for a full-blown jihadist resurgence in Syria raises fears that experienced fighters could either attempt to travel to Europe to carry out attacks or remotely inspire and activate individuals already on the continent. The instability in Syria directly fuels the security anxieties of nations thousands of miles away. Ultimately, the unending chaos in Syria serves the interests of no one except the extremist groups that thrive in such environments. The international community faces an urgent imperative to develop a coherent and sustained strategy to address not only the symptoms, but also the root causes of Syria's protracted crisis. This requires a multi-pronged approach encompassing robust counter-terrorism efforts, sustained humanitarian aid, support for inclusive governance, and diplomatic initiatives aimed at de-escalating regional rivalries. Without such a concerted effort, Syria risks becoming a permanent incubator for extremism, casting a long and dark shadow over global security for years to come.